the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zahrt, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and I'm pleased to introduce you all to my colleague and esteemed fellow board member of ISAR, Cameron, who's beaming in from Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome.
Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And today you'll notice I'm sitting in a different spot in the building. I've actually taken you to the break room because you are one of the major astrologers who have always consistently, every time I see you, you remind me, breathe, take a break, get back in your body. So I just wanted to honor that presence that you hold for the rest of us in the community by showing you where you can relax here in the building and have a meal, a little cup of coffee or tea, and also the expansive floor where yoga could happen while you're reading books.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It makes me feel like what I'm doing is getting out there. So that makes me feel good. I love that.
So speak to me a little more about what you're doing in your work currently before we dive into the books that shaped your practice.
Yeah, totally. Actually, right now, in astrology, I'm actually getting deeper into like predictive techniques, especially because I've been working with like a more elderly population more lately. And so it's been interesting having to be like so much more precise with my medical astrology practice. Whereas before, I often teach, especially more my public showing face is more like holistic health and astrology. You can transition from natal astrology to medical easy through holistic health and astrology. But really, like my medical astrology practice is getting like deeper and deeper every single day. So that's something I've been like really diving into. And adjunct in 2 movement courses. I'm in a somatic therapy training, and I'm also in Ayurveda school. So I'm infusing all of these things into my astrological practice as well.
That's awesome. So Cameron, how did medical astrology become your focus?
Yeah, so working in Memphis, Tennessee, I was in a spiritual supply store and I was working there as an herbalist. And so I was just working with plants like very like physically, right? Like, and I was in the back of the herb room. It started out me just like asking people questions when they got herbs, like, what does that do? What does that do? And then, just having a whole bookshelf of books right there to just like reference, and then starting to invite people into like trying this herb, trying that herb, or asking them, why are you doing that one? And then looking back and being like, I would have picked this one, and doing that for months at a time, but also rooting myself in like actually going out and like starting to connect with plants. Because by that time I started learning from the School of Evolutionary Herbalism with Sajah Popham. And one thing he really emphasized was like really having a connection with the plants. So like just sitting with the plant and like learning how to actually open your heart, like not in a fluffy metaphorical kind of way, but actually opening your heart and being able to receive information from other beings. And so one day I was talking to plants and they were just like, start learning about the planets. And then I had a dream with my favorite plant, passion flower, and it told me to go to Portland, Oregon. And I was really confused. And I was like, Portland, Oregon. And that's when the next day I woke up and I went on Facebook and it was like Lost Renaissance Medicine Conference, Judith Hill. And it was about plants and planets.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And so that's what led me into like medical astrology and doing astrology more in general.
Yeah. So that was then your first kind of landing into astrology proper.
Yeah, exactly. Everything before that was like psychological archetypes, kind of like dabbling in alchemy here and there. And then like knowing some plants from like working in a spiritual supply store, like this plant goes with this planet. And it's like that kind of thing, even though none of them really made sense to me because no one explained it. And I'm not that type of person. I'm always like, why did you choose that? How are you thinking about that? Rather than this, that. So.
Right. It was very surface level. And then Judith Hill got you deep.
Exactly.
Okay, so where did you encounter your first astrology book? What was the book? And just describe that moment of having astrology enter your brain through book format.
Yeah, so the first astrology book had to be a book that was in that spiritual supply store that I was working at. What it was, I cannot remember right now because the type of person that I am, like, especially back then, I like being right. And so I would open the books and start reading them and I'm like, this isn't it. This isn't right. And then so I started asking everybody around me, like, what books would you read in astrology? And then people would show me books and I'll be like, this isn't it. This isn't it. This isn't it. This isn't it. And then I finally came across Evolutionary Astrology. And so the first book that I ever actually read front to back, which is very few books that I read front to back, was Pluto 1 from Jeffrey Wolf Green. Right now, for the audio, I'm holding up this red and black book, and it has this like kind of ominous vibe to it. There's some other covers too, but this has like kind of speaks to the depth that this book has.
Yeah. This was also one of my first books, and I'm holding up a copy that must have been published before yours that has this almost 9 Inch Nails looking industrial metal cover on it with a person triumphantly raising their arms, almost nude figure in some smoke. Your cover looks like it might even be some kind of nuclear event.
Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, Pluto life.
Yeah. So how did this book shape your mind when you finally said, okay, this is the front to back book, I need to read all of it? What was that?
Yeah. So the way it shaped my mind was because I was working at a facility before I started working at a spiritual supply store. I was working at a facility for youth, like level 4 lockdown, and like people just going through like deep traumatic processes in their lifetime. And so reading that book really made me like reflect on that time that I was there and all the things I had been through and all the people that I met in my life, and brought me to so many tears at like really understanding like what is going on underneath the surface with people all the time. It was so simple too, because it's just like there's 12 signs Pluto could be in. And, you know, with evolutionary astrology, we kind of, the houses kind of echo the flavor of the signs as well. And so just thinking about it, oh my gosh, there's only 12 things to know this depth about, and it can apply to anyone, and it's going to apply and manifest or create in different ways in people's life. But like the depth that I could reach just by looking at one placement and like feeling into that, you know, it's not for the faint of heart, to be quite honest, because it was like, I really was brought to tears so many times. Like even reading all those pages, it's like, my Pluto's in the 11th house, but why am I like wanting to cry about Pluto in the 2nd house? Why am I wanting to cry about Pluto in the 6th house? And just like really understanding the depth of, how astrology can like illuminate people's psychology. So that's, it was, wow. Yeah, that's what it was.
Wow. Yeah. You're making me want to read it all over again, because I've almost forgotten now. It's been 25 years. It's like, oh yeah, how did that actually shape my journey there? Another thing we have in common is it was in Portland that I got my first astrology books as well.
Beautiful.
So when you met Judith Hill and went to that medical astrology conference, it was like, oh yeah, there's something about this Cascadian area that kind of gets people into the star stuff. Like even your plants were telling you like, go to Cascadia, you know? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I was directed to specific plants out there, and they told me specific things that I need to do with the community in Memphis too, as well. So every time I go back to Portland, I pretty much go to the same place with the same trees. There were a bunch of cedars, and like, wow, they really do speak to me loud out there.
Yeah. And Jeffrey Wolf Green is also from this region as well. So he got his start in Seattle in the 70s, right around the time Maggie was creating her Astrology et al. Shop.
Yeah.
All right. So if you were going to be stranded somewhere for quite a number of days and you could only take 3 astrology books with you, including the ephemeris, which 3 books would you have in your pack?
So the first book I would pick, because I love plants and planets so much, is Evolutionary Herbalism by Sajah Popham. For the audio, it's this nice purple book with a little plant on it. And then it has like this like light at the top corner of it. So yeah, I would pick Evolutionary Herbalism. Also, it's just like one of the main places that I started learning things at. And so something about that origin point just like has a special place in my heart. And also it teaches not just about understanding the archetypes of astrology, but understanding how those archetypes manifest in the world and how we can embody things through different modalities as well. So it has things about Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, the organ systems, emotional, psychological processes, as well as like the spiritual essence of what we're trying to tap into and taste when it comes to astrology as well. And so that one is just like, gotta have it, because it's going to help me not only with staying tuned to the planets, but also I'm going to be on land.
Yeah.
And so it's going to help you tune to the plants as well.
Right. Because you're going to have a sort of guidebook for what's directly in front of you in that specific spot. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to how the word evolutionary comes through the text? Because it's in the title and, you know, we have evolutionary astrology. Is that what Sajah's doing, or is it a different meaning of evolutionary?
Yeah, I would say it's a very different meaning. So from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, it's more talking about, you could use the word changing, right? Because everything's are ever changing. And so with evolutionary astrology, even though people project on it oftentimes that is about becoming spiritual and enlightened, you're evolving. It's like really talking about the change in the process of the deep self, or what we could call the soul, and how that changes through time and through different lifetimes. And with evolutionary herbalism, it's more about progress, let's say. So it's evolving herbalism from a perspective of Ayurveda's over here, traditional Chinese medicine is over here, Western herbalism, whatever that really is over here, Unani Tibbs over here. But like really taking those things and infusing them to create progress moving forward and understanding from a holistic perspective. So that's the difference in the evolutionary, I would say. Great question. I never even said that. So thanks for bringing that out of me. I love that.
Well, thanks for sharing that too, and like showing us what Sage is doing with that, because I know he is primarily an herbalist who's then gone into astrology by way of, I think, alchemy, actually, which is sometimes called celestial agriculture. Ooh. And so did Sage's work also inspire you to make alchemical tinctures using plants and planets?
It had me do like slight things, and it also had me like sitting with the process with other people. But I haven't gotten down into like the actual like nitty gritty of like making things quite yet, even though I've definitely used the processes in my own, like, I guess we could say spiritual work or psychological things as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. What would your next book be?
So in no specific order, but the second book would be Mark Jones' Healing the Soul. And this is another evolutionary astrology book. I just love this book so much, again, because it's just talking about the archetypes and understanding like how people's psychology works in general. Like I've had some people I've worked with who aren't into astrology. I had them read this book and told them, don't even worry about what the astrology is saying. I just want you to understand deeper processes of your emotional, psychological state of being, and also understanding the people that you work with before we go into these other things. And so it's been invaluable with that for people. And also it gives like a good approach to how to talk to people or how to think about things from a depthful place. And also he's a psychosynthesis therapist. And so it's just a nice orientation in learning how to console with people or how to be kind while we're looking at these things that can have a lot of depth to it. So that book, Healing the Soul from Mark Jones. Yeah, I love that book too.
Yeah. So he talks a lot about like the subtitles, Pluto, Uranus, and the lunar nodes. And so each astrologer, as we go through our careers, we kind of have our own vantage point on those factors. And so what is it about Mark's vantage point that really draws you in?
Yes. So his vantage point to me too, and I like the way he takes what Jeffrey Wolf Green has taught him and makes it his own. And he talks about it more from like the deep self and like what someone's like deepest emotional and psychological attachments are. So what is grasping people underneath the surface in life? And so what is their underlying thing? And him being able to talk about that in a way that's actually like poetic and beautiful and kind and graceful, but it's like actually like the darkest, deepest material that we have in our life. And so to be able to take that type of material and make it kind in a sense, that's one thing that I always brought to my practice. And then also bringing Uranus in there and how that represents the potential for authenticity and your unique electrical essence, let's say, and how that's a spectrum between that and how we fragment ourselves in life, or the subtle mental trauma that we might have in our life, not just from the perspective of this one thing happened to me and, oh my gosh, it was so traumatic, but also this thing happened to me over and over again when I was younger so much that it changed the whole way that I behave, but it's not me at all. And I would never even notice it if I didn't have this like signature in my chart.
Yeah.
And so that's just like such a beautiful thing. I can't explain to you how many times at the beginning of my practice, I was doing readings at Panera Bread for like in exchange for my reading. I was just getting sandwiches for my readings and like taking people all the way down to like the essence of like why they came here. And soon after I learned like, hey, Cameron, maybe we can learn some other stuff so that we can gradually go towards this. But, it was just like so profound and so much depth, and so many people received healing just through being seen that much. So, wow. Yeah, I love that book.
So you took like a cannonball straight into the depths of their soul.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dive right in.
And it was like perfect because like before that, being relatable to people was slightly difficult for me, especially because I did just take everything straight down to the bottom. And that's probably why the other astrology books, I'm like, this isn't right. It's not enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's not deep enough. And then coming out of like that process with working with kids and youth at that facility, those were things that I was like kind of just getting accustomed to, like being in relationships. So it actually became my personal norm. And I had to like understand that I slightly was a bit clouded by that, or I was so immersed in that it's like, okay, I need to modulate my practice because I can't be in Panera Bread having people breaking down crying all the time.
Yeah, that's not exactly the place you want to be having that experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it actually was lovely because for me, like a lot of people I was working with, because I could exchange for sandwiches, they were in such positions that there wasn't this highfalutin like feeling of like this is right or wrong. It was like very renegade, very like this single mom down the street who lives in the hood who can actually only pay $10 here. And so if this is going to happen, it actually has to happen through me. It has to happen through this present moment at the Panera Bread. And so something about that also is beautiful, to allow like a whole different life, or astrology took on a whole different life of its own from that perspective. You know, like there's not that many people that I know who would even say that's okay right now. And maybe I don't think that's okay right now, but I also know that this is a thought and it's an idea. And it's not necessarily the truth, because there are people out here who need those things and we have to meet them where they're at. And so that's what was the process that I was going through.
Yeah, it sounds like you were deeply called to this as a vocation and showing up for that.
Totally, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Do you want to spend your professional life telling people when to have sex? My name is Nicholas Matzolsop, and I'm the author of Fertility Astrology. Join me online this fall for the Fertility Astrology Intensive. This course is a first of its kind, consolidating all the astrological techniques you will need to be a world-class astrology and fertility consultant. I'm here to enhance your astrology. We are astrologers who want to make the most of the situation for yourself and your client. And we're going to share with you the things that have worked in my practice in the last 20 years. At the end of 14 weeks, you're going to be really confident when somebody asks you, do you think there's a chance I'm going to get pregnant this year? You'll have something real to tell them. But especially, come, let's talk about sex, baby.
To learn more and register for the September 9th start date, please visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. At that point where you felt that cloudiness or the kind of like, oh man, I'm going too deep, this is a little intense, like where did you pivot next in your work?
Yeah, so I started just looking at like all different forms of astrology. I still hadn't quite made it to like the traditional astrology kind of perspective quite yet, even though there was some things I was dabbling in, just like learning more of the associations of the planets and the houses from a less just emotional, psychological perspective and more of a concrete perspective. Like I started, instead of going from Pluto and then working my way into the planets, I kind of started working just with the personal planets and connecting with people more just on their like everyday shooting the shit kind of level. And then seeing how much capacity they actually had to be able to take them to that depth when it was necessary within a process, rather than starting there from the depth itself.
Yeah. That's a neat way of looking at it in terms of like, you know, whenever I'm thinking like people go, oh, wow, someone's got a Pluto-Uranus conjunction in Virgo. I'm like, that's the 20th century. Like there's a whole decade of people with that configuration. So
right.
The personal planets really make it individualized on a level where, you know, it's like you kind of get into that, like, who are you straight in front of me, showing up, saying hello, you know, having that more casual approach.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would kind of look at personal planets and see which personal planets had the most aspects to the outer planets as well, because I did have the orientation / even could potentially say a bit of a unconscious fixation on going to the depths too as well. So it was still a nice like bridge there.
So given how many conversations you've had with people in a consulting setting, can you already see their astrology and their comportment, like how they're acting or holding themselves before you even get into a chart?
Yeah, I could do that before astrology for the most part too.
Okay.
So
okay.
And also the way I orient more is towards the fundamentals of realities, I would say. So thinking about like body constitutions, thinking about what they call the Mahagunas, which would correspond in astrology to me, it would correspond to a mutable, fixed cardinal, and then just looking at the elements. And so that's how my mind actually operates in reality. And then I start putting the pieces together from there.
So many systems come into play when you look at it from that elemental basis.
Exactly. But like as far as body types go, because body types, they have specific qualities as far as emotional, psychological. So I work more with constitution when it comes to just like meeting and greeting people than I even do thinking about astrology, even though the astrology will easily overlay over top of it.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So what's your third book?
So my third book, Mastering Traditional Astrology from Mychal A. Bryan. Like, I just want to say for a moment, like, shout out to Mychal A. Bryan, because this book is amazing. It's like so big. I could just like feel the love and care and dedication and devotion that he put into this book. And also just being one of his students, like the process of just like watching him over time, like through time, just like evolve and progress as an astrologer has just been such a beautiful thing. And it's really just a really good book on how to approach things in a way that's not so intimidating, but also has depth. It also has some poetic qualities to it. So it's concrete, but also poetic. And I think that's something sometimes I've noticed with traditional astrology, things could feel for me like I'm not being touched. I feel like I'm just watching something and I'm observing something, but like I need to feel like I'm being touched or tasted or held in some type of way when I read a book. And so Mychal did an amazing job with it. And he self-published it. It's like this beautiful cover. It's got the sky there and the lines of longitude and latitude. And it's just like, he just did an amazing job with this book. So yeah, this book is really special.
Yeah. And it's hot off the press too. It's actually just been published, I believe, this year.
Yeah. Super new. Yeah.
Very cool.
One of many, I'm sure.
I think he's got 8 planned to correspond with each of his classes.
Yeah, 7 or 8 or something. It's Mychal, so in progress. Definitely more than 5. Let's say that for now.
Yeah, for sure. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so that's allowed you to kind of get add some skeleton to the muscle of your astrology with some traditional tech.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. By the time I got this book, I was in year 2 with Austin Coppock by then. I like learned a decent amount through reading books like Chris Brennan's book, read it through Chris Brennan's book. I never got through the whole thing. Learning some things from Demetra George, Kelly Surtees, and a bunch of other astrologers just because I'm so eclectic about it. If I was to go back, this would be the one that I would start reading when it comes to traditional astrology. And I already took his level 1 FOCA class, Foundations of Classical Astrology. So for the most part, I knew most of the things that I've read through in this book, but still, it's just really special. And the way he laid it out is so nice.
Yeah. And I appreciate too how in 2 of the books you've chosen so far, and maybe this is true for Sajah's book as well, you've mentioned poetry and the way that the astrologer is writing in a format that has some kind of flourish to it that allows you to like hear. It's almost like you can hear Mark talking to you through the book. You can hear Mychal talking to you through the book. Wow. And you're picking up on that. So that's a really cool through line for what I'm hearing you need when you're reading an astrology book, you know?
Yeah, and you picked that up really nicely because I only read these books in their voices.
Really?
And I don't do that with every book. So even with the Pluto book, it's like I'm using this Jeffrey Wolf Green voice, and you know he's got this like he's like this tone to him that like brings you even more to the depths. And then Mark Jones with his English accent, and even when I would read the book, I would have like certain pauses in reading the book. And with Sajah's book, kind of his whimsical way of going about it, but also everything being like very neatly woven together. And Mychal Bryan's voice and like his Bohemian accent and stuff like that. So yeah, you picked up on that really nice. And that's really cool that you picked up on that because I don't do that with every book, but with these ones specifically, always in their voices.
Yeah, but I think that also speaks to the way that you see people too when you're present in the community, because it's almost like a be yourself and you're going to be there, like the authenticity that you're calling forth in each person that you encounter. And that can be scary, I think, for some people, because you're really like, you're showing up totally in this authentic mode and very, I think, quieter than people might expect. Like, what's Cameron thinking? Oh my God. You know, but then if you just ask, you say, so it's not like there's a thing, you know, it's like, wait, relationships can be this legit and real and present. And this is the moment like we have now, you know, it's not about what happened at the start of the conference or what's going to happen by the end of it. It's like, you like came up to me at Norwalk and you're just like, how's your heart? And I'm like, what? Like, we're going to go there now. Like, but it's cool because you're also showing that in the books that you've chosen too. It's just like, it's about depth. It's about authenticity. It's about voice. occupying your voice and not being afraid to share that voice. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful collection.
Yeah.
So if you were going to advise someone on where to start learning astrology, what would you recommend to them?
As far as the book or just overall?
You can pick. How would you get someone in the pathway of the stars?
Yeah, I probably would take them down through the route of evolutionary astrology. Really the answer is depends on the person, what they're looking for, kind of how they present themselves, because everything's in this like dynamic relationship of what is the truth, what is the context of the content. Oftentimes, though, I definitely steer people towards evolutionary astrology. So that could be Jeffrey Wolf Green, it could be Mark Jones, it could be Steven Forrest. But I always add a caveat that I don't think that you should stop here. But I do think that something about like living and breathing with astrology and understanding or feeling into the ability of possibility is something I think is really important for new people coming in, because if you dive into like text heavy books, oftentimes it starts to, like I said before, it kind of can get dry a little bit. And that's not something that I want for people. So I always, not only do I invite them into the evolutionary astrology and then invite them to something different, but I always give them my contact information and say, when you're done with this, and or if you feel like this isn't for you, reach out to me, let me know, and I'll make sure that you get the book that you're desiring so that you can actually access what you're looking for with astrology.
Very cool. So you kind of see like, okay, after you take a taste of this, what's the next entree? And they come back and they say, okay, that wasn't for me. What about this?
Exactly. Yeah. And also just letting people know, I'm like, this isn't astrology. This is a form of astrology, or this is a way to think about astrology. This is a possibility with astrology, but there's many possibilities. And so what do you want to do? Who are you? And you want to find the astrology that works for you, but also an astrology that does work. And you can sink your teeth into, whether it's actual concrete prediction or holding space and caring for humans.
Yeah. When did you realize that there were more than one kind of astrology?
Oh, I don't know if I ever didn't realize it, to be quite honest.
That's so cool.
Yeah, because especially because like thinking about it from the plants telling me to go to the planets, and also during that time I was the plants, and like I was going through like a year of working with different spagyrics every month and learning about the archetypes. So even learning with Sajah, there was no end. Mm-hmm. If as above, so below, then anything below can be corresponded to that which is above. So there can't be just one form. That's not even possible in reality from my perspective, I guess, always looking at it, so yeah, it's not possible for it to be one. Yeah.
No, I know. I love that. I'm just thinking about like when some people begin learning astrology, they sort of cathect onto that first form and they're like, this is astrology. And it's like, this is one kind of all these various kinds of astrology. And
right.
So that's cool that you already got there from Jump Street. And I just love that the plants brought you to the planets. That's so cool.
Yeah. And it's been so helpful because, I have a Gemini moon and an Aquarius sun. So sometimes I could easily get lost in thought. But anytime that would happen, I would just go straight back to the plants, straight back to the land, or just drink some tea and then ground myself. And from that place, I could more easily say, I don't know, or find some clarity from the correspondence of what I was trying to figure out. Even at one point in time, I was trying to learn aspects through different type of plant formulas and stuff like that. So I would have like leader herbs and then a herb that would just come in lightly and how I would put them together. Sometimes I would put one plant in first and then add the second plant later, or put them in at the same time if it was a conjunction, things like this. And like just through that process, like I actually started having like a library of wisdom of lessons from plants and planets that was invaluable, and I could never say I could find in a book. So that's been really beautiful. And to just really be open to that and being a vessel of that. And I was doing all these things in a silo to begin with. So I didn't know that this was not normal or normal at all. Yeah. And it was just like an unfolding organic process. So that has helped me so much throughout all my astrological learnings, especially as I've learned how to be more predictive and stuff like that.
I love that. Just getting in there, get your hands dirty and listen, pay attention, be aware.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending some time sharing yourself with us today and giving us a download on your interrelationship with textuality and astrology, in addition to the plants and planets. And yeah, I look forward to having you back sometime.
Thanks for having me. You're amazing.
Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next time.